And with that, Rosa, I'll take any questions. And thank you very much from our team here at the University of Florida.
Thanks, Paul. We have two questions. One is, it said some people suggest 20% leaching is an indication of a good irrigation practice. How much water leaching would you think it's appropriate to achieve enough irrigation and algae control?
Okay, that's a great question. So when it comes to leaching, there's some different aspects to it. Okay, one of them is that irrigation systems aren't perfect in terms of the way they distribute water. So in order to, when you irrigate, if you're trying to irrigate up to container capacity, meaning that you're getting a good, strong irrigation event each time you turn on your system, then you're going to have some dry spots and some wet spots. And so a little bit of leaching may be needed just to make sure that those dry spots are completely irrigated. So the more variable your irrigation system is, the more water you end up using. And Dr. Yeager in the first presentation on BMPs said that one of the things you should really do is measure the uniformity of your irrigation system. The other aspect of leaching relates to nutrition. So it all depends, unfortunately, on the quality of your irrigation water as to how much leaching you need to do. There are a lot of growers who sub-irrigate their crops in greenhouses and a few in nurseries. And in that system, you're watering from the bottom of the pot. You don't have leaching in that system. And there are many, many acres of greenhouses that are grown with zero leaching with sub-irrigation. However, you need to have a pretty good quality water to be able to do that. If you have poor quality water, meaning that there's a fairly high concentration, especially of sodium and chloride in the water, then you have to leach. And so that's where the 20% leaching may come from a grower who's got a moderately poor irrigation water. How do you know if your leaching is enough? Well, the way you can do that is to be tracking the EC in your substrate, whether you do that with a pour through, a 1 to 2 test, whatever test you use, that you see whether EC is climbing up or dropping over time. If EC is tending to climb up, then you're not leaching enough, okay? And it's either because you're putting on too much fertilizer or because of the poor water quality. So if you're leaching enough, that EC should be staying fairly stable. Keep in mind that image of that piggy bank there in terms of the account. If the EC is dropping in your growing media over time, then you're probably having to put on more fertilizer and you're leaching too much. Next question.
The next question is, how often would you suggest growers to monitor biological load with Petri films?
Yeah, that's a good question too. How often should you monitor the biological load with Petri films? Well, we've monitored some greenhouse locations over time on a monthly basis. And one of the things that we see is that the biological load, as pretty much as you'd expect, as it warms up in the spring, the biological load increases. And so, for example, if you're chlorinating, then you're going to have to add more chlorine as the season goes by because there's more demand used up by your irrigation water. Okay, so one thing is that biological load will change over time. I would suggest that if you are seeing problems with clogging of emitters and you think that it may be biologically based, then it's worth looking at using the Petri films from your irrigation water, the source, as well as in the line. The other way that I would check, the other times that I'd use the Petri films would be to do, probably a once or twice a year check before and after treatment if I'm putting on a sanitizing agent, just to check that the system's actually
Another question is there any easy way to tell if cloudy water is due to lime or iron particulates?
Is there an easy way to tell if cloudy water is okay? If cloudy water is due to lime or iron particulates, well, one aspect might be to look at the color of the solution, and that iron's going to tend to be cloudier. But probably the best way to do it would be to send a sample off to a horticulture water testing lab and indicate when you send the sample in what your question is. What is the contaminant that's in the water that's causing it to be cloudy? And so it's important that they know what your question is, because, for example, if they take that water sample and they filter it out before they do the analysis, then they may not be able to answer your question. But if they do some other ways of preparing the sample, then they could easily tell us. If it's lime, you're going to have high alkalinity. If it is high iron, then if they acidify that sample, it's going to have high iron levels.
Okay, that was the last question. Unless you have something to add, I think we'll close the webinar here.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Happy New Year.